Some relief on the way for businesses affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and recent unrest, looting and vandalism. Some smaller businesses are not insured and have been severely affected. So President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced that COVID-19 affected businesses will get a once-off business survival payout. Other measures include the expansion of the employment tax incentive, and the payment of pay taxes for a period of 3 months will be deferred. Let's discuss this with economist Dr Azar Jammine. Dr. Jammine, thank you so much for making time. This relief is going to go a long way in helping businesses and South Africans affected by both the pandemic and the unrest. The president didn't really indicate where the money would be coming from, except to say the measures will be implemented without compromising our fiscal sustainability. Are we likely to see funds being reprioritized?
Well, ideally, we should be seeing funds being reprioritized. But essentially what the president hinted at was the fact that because economic growth until recently has turned out to be somewhat better than had been budgeted for in February, the government's tax revenues have been overshooting what was actually budgeted for. Remember, we had a huge shortfall last year because of the smack we took through COVID-19, and tax revenues collapsed. But what we subsequently found was that they didn't collapse quite as much as had been expected. Now, what the president seems to be saying is that this overshoot thus far that we have had in our tax revenues can now be used to supplement these social grants. It's just such a pity that it took them so long to actually introduce these measures, because if they had introduced them after moving to adjusted lockdown level 4, and poor people suddenly started resuming getting 350 Rand a month, maybe we would not have had all the rioting and unrest that we have had.
Yeah. Do you think we have strong mechanisms in place, Doctor, to avoid the theft that happened last year? I mean, the Auditor General was telling us that they had found that there are people who actually benefited from the UIF funds, people who even benefited from the 350 unemployment grant, who actually didn't qualify. Some of these people were owners of companies that were doing business with government, and a lot of people are worried, and rightly so right now, about whether or not we're going to see those greedy politicians getting their hands in the cookie jar.
Unfortunately, I cannot answer that with any degree of certainty. The fact is that under the Zuma regime, the country developed such a corrupt nature that corruption has become the order of the day. And people don't, this whole idea of tumamina, it's actually out the window. People are in it for themselves. And we've seen it with the PPE scandals all the way through to the present. It's actually permeated our society very negatively, to the extent that people are happy to steal from the poor to make themselves rich. I don't know whether we can actually, how we get out of that kind of mindset.
This is more like a stimulus package, right? What the president announced. The government still needs to implement the economic recovery plans.
I wouldn't call it a stimulus package. I would call it a relief package. It's really just to try and keep businesses going, try and keep businesses sustaining employment levels, and also trying to enable the poor to survive at a very minimal rate. I mean, 350 Rand a month doesn't go a long way, but it still has served as a survival mechanism. So I wouldn't call it a stimulus package, but it certainly will prevent the economy from sliding further than it might otherwise have done.
Let's talk about the impact on investor confidence. It's quite bad. The president tried to assure investors that government will respond more quickly and decisively to reports of extortion by critical groups. What does government need to do to respond to concerns by investors, some of whom were actually considering disinvesting?
I think the key is government has to show a real determination to come to grips with the structural problems in the economy. The first being corruption, the second being the inadequacy of infrastructural investment. The third being education, to try and enable people to get out of that vicious circle of not being able to find a job and to add value in the economy. And then, of course, there are specific things such as energy, security, broadband spectrum, making it more available to, that kind of thing. There are many structural impediments. It has to show determination to do that. And it has to show determination to do that against factional elements within its own ranks that are actually opposed to the introduction of such measures. And on top of that, we need to have greater security that we will not see a rerun of the kind of mayhem that we had a couple of weeks ago. And that speaks to an improvement in the ability of the police and the defense force to actually enforce law and order. I think we have made some progress in those fields over the last few months, certainly on the law and order. In fact, many will argue that the commitment to maintaining law and respect for the Constitution was at the heart, the catalyst that actually brought about the riots that we had. But investors have taken that to heart, and quite positively. But there needs to be very much more, and that is the President spoke yesterday about his determination to enact structural economic reforms. Let's see more action in that regard. And one of the key elements there is to improve the capacity of the state, because so long as people are deployed because of their affiliations to the party and not because of their competence and qualifications, we will not be able to see infrastructural investment programs actually being properly implemented.